There are some things in life we do for the money, and others we do for the people. This project is one I would have quoted $2,000 or more to make. Instead, I did it for my cost. You might be asking, why? See, one of my closest friends recently retired from his position as the pastor of the local Lutheran church, and his congregation wanted to give him a gift to honor him and to display his ministerial stoles. They're those things that you sometimes see pastors wear over their shoulders. I was honored to be approached with this opportunity, and with just a few guidelines, I set to work designing a shadow box. But not just a shadow box. See, these stoles needed to be displayed, but they also needed to be easy to retrieve if he should ever need to use them. So I had to come up with a way to both display them and keep them accessible. We'll get back to that in a moment. You'll see here that I'm using dovetails for the corners of this display cabinet, and I'm using a couple of jigs here. I actually did another video showing how to do this, and I'll link it in the end screen of this video, so be sure to stick around to the end and click into that if you're wanting to see how I did these dovetails. They ended up so simple and so fast to make because of this method. Now let me get back to my story. I met my friend, Andrew, over 11 years ago when I first moved to the small town in southern Alberta where I live and work. We immediately bonded over things like TV, video games, and talking about theology. That said, I have to confess I'm slow to make friends, and I would say it took a couple of years before he became not only a colleague, but a true friend and confidant. But you see, there's something I haven't told you about Andrew. He struggles with a degenerative disease called Charcot-Marie Tooth disease, or CMT for short, and I'm sure that I pronounced that wrong, but I'm sure that he'll forgive me. Soon after I met him, because of this CMT, he had to have his leg amputated below the knee. But the amazing thing is that he still pressed on in church ministry even throughout this challenging circumstance. But there's more. See, that's not the only challenge that he faced throughout his ministry, and more on that in a second. Let me talk a little bit more about the build. Making a cabinet like this is necessarily full of trade-offs, especially when there is a client of any sort involved. The first set of guidelines asked for room for a number of photos in addition to the stoles, but as I measured everything out, it quickly became apparent that to do so would require the cabinet to be the size of a large TV and would weigh twice as much. Certainly not something that my friend would want on his wall. Eventually, we settled on something much more manageable and ended up around the size of a Jersey display box. But the construction still had to be something that could withstand the weight, especially the door with the glass. That's why I decided to hold the door frame together with 3/8 dowels and to mount the door with a full-length piano hinge, which turned out absolutely perfect. I've gone ahead and glued up our frame, and here we've got dry fitted the outer assembly. So at this point, I need to measure up for the inset back panel here. Once we have that done, I think we'll be ready to sand things up and get this thing going. While I spend some time sanding and doing the main frame glue up, let me say that I really appreciate you sticking around for this project's story, and I trust that you're enjoying it. It would mean the world if you would consider leaving a like, a comment, subscribing, or sharing this video. Thanks. As I said, Andrew went through a lot in his time in ministry, and I'm realizing now that I should probably clarify that he has shared all of this publicly on his YouTube channel, The Outer Twilight, as well as having signed off on this video before I made it public to you all. So no, I'm not sharing what's not mine to share. Yeah, just in case you were wondering. Anyway, Andrew is one of those rare people who is full of empathy. When others are hurting, he hurts too. Now, as you can imagine, feelings like these are both a great help and a great detriment in a career where one is constantly dealing with the joys and hurts, pains, loss, and grief of others. I can honestly say that I've often envied Andrew's empathetic abilities when working with congregants and supporting people outside our community. Unfortunately, the constant bombardment of loss and difficulties and his various health challenges meant that he came to the difficult decision to take an early retirement from pastoring his church. With everything that's happened in his life and with what he means to me and his congregation, it was essential that this project turned out perfectly. That meant spending extra time on details like the corners of the door's edge profiles like you see me doing here, taking that time with the chisel to make sure everything met perfectly. It also meant ensuring the French cleat was not only attached strongly, but that it would also be easy to attach it to 2 wall studs, while also positioning the shadow box nicely on the wall. I suppose it would probably be helpful to explain what a French cleat is, just in case you don't know. Essentially, it's 2 pieces of wood with a 45 degree that meet together to lock something into place, just like you see here. Because I wanted to make sure that it was as easy to mount this attractively as possible, I started drilling out multiple holes on the wall-mounted French cleat, as you can see me doing right now. And the purpose behind that was simply to make sure that a stud could be hit. Now, do you remember earlier when I was saying that I needed a way for my friends to be able to both display and use the stoles? That's what we're working on right now. I'm making some little standoffs that are going to have magnets set in them. Of course, I didn't get much footage of this process. I was working very quickly at this point. But the inner panel with a couple of slots in it has magnets on it that correspond to the magnets on these standoffs, which allows the whole panel to come out from the back, as you can see happening right here. The stoles are able to go through these 2 slots and be secured with some elastics at the back, and then the whole thing can pop in and pop out really easily while also holding securely. From there, it was time to measure out and route and clean up with a chisel the grooves for the piano hinges that are going to be holding the door in place. Now, the original plan had been to use picture frame glass in this shadow box, but in all honesty, I had a mishap that caused that to break, so I pivoted to using some acrylic, and I actually think that was the right decision. The acrylic was held securely in place with some silicone caulk and a few pieces of interior trim.
Hey, so this is the display box that Stephen made for me on behalf of the church that I used to serve, and this is the stools that I used to wear. I'm very thankful for this piece. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a great way to have some memories of what I used to do. Stephen did a fantastic job, and I'm proud to call him my friend, and I'm very proud of this piece that he made. So thank you, Stephen.